Tonight, a man is behind bars for the murder of a Racine mother of 6. Terry Jackson is accused of killing Brittany Booker back in April. Her youngest daughter is just 2 years old. Brittany's father now raising her children. Bruce Harrison spoke to him about what he's feeling now that an arrest has been made.
Leonard Larry was one of the first to know.
A long time waiting, coming rather, and to wake up to a text, got him. It's the best feeling in the world.
But for Larry, this isn't closure, it's just the next step.
Any court date, any kind of parole, anything that got to do with him, I'm going to be there. You is not walking on nothing.
This is the story of Brittany Booker.
According to Racine police, U.S. Marshals arrested Terry Jackson at a home in Chicago after a brief standoff. He's accused of attacking 2 women, including Booker, in February in Racine. Police couldn't find him, and later, in April, he allegedly killed Booker.
Larry tells us that Racine investigator Don Nuttall did an outstanding job getting his man. Larry only wishes that Nuttall had been on the case from that first attack.
If he had been at the beginning,
Take a shot.
we probably wouldn't be here if he had took the case from the beginning. But we got him, Brett. We got him.
Larry has cleared the last things out of his daughter's home. Booker's 6 kids, who used to run around here, are now living with their grandmother.
I'm upset about a lot of things, but worse, but it's over. They got him. So let's see what system we're going to do.
Yeah.
Let's hope they don't film me on that part.
Larry's next move is something he's good at.
On April 24, 2022, law enforcement in Racine, Wisconsin, responded to a missing person report at a residence in the 1300 block of Villa Street. Officers located a vehicle registered to a local resident and found her body inside. The victim was identified as 30-year-old Brittany Booker. Investigators determined she had sustained multiple blunt force injuries and a single gunshot wound to the head, and classified her death as a homicide. Terry Lee Jackson Jr. was identified as the suspect. Police reviewed doorbell camera recordings that captured Booker leaving her home early that morning in the company of Jackson. GPS data from Booker's phone showed the vehicle traveled multiple locations in the neighborhood before law enforcement located her body near her residence. Investigators believe Jackson compelled Booker to leave her home and drive the vehicle. This incident was connected to prior violent confrontations involving Jackson. In February 2022, Jackson was accused of assaulting his ex-girlfriend and Booker with a hammer during separate incidents that resulted in serious injuries and emergency medical treatment. Law enforcement issued warrants, including a no-bond warrant for Jackson after he failed to appear in court, but he evaded capture. Following Booker's homicide, police and the U.S. Marshals Service initiated a multi-state fugitive search spanning at least 5 states. A reward was offered for information leading to Jackson's arrest.
The search continues for the man authorities say killed a Racine mother of 6.
And new today, a private donor has increased the reward amount to $5,000 for any information on where Terry Jackson might be. Racine police say Jackson shot and killed Brittany Booker. Her body was found 2 weeks ago. If you know where Jackson is, you can call any of the numbers on your screen.
Jackson was located and arrested by federal and local authorities in Chicago on May 22, 2022. He was charged with first-degree intentional homicide and multiple additional felony counts, including kidnapping, possession of a firearm by a felon, and bail jumping. This is the complete story, every action, every chilling detail. Welcome to Everyday True Crime. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. Stay with us for more gripping investigations and raw true crime stories delivered daily. Now let's dive in. Brittany Booker was a 30-year-old woman living in Racine, Wisconsin at the time of her death in April 2022. She was a mother of 6 children, with the youngest child reported to be around 2 years old. Her family and community publicly identified her as the parent of children with a range of ages, all of whom were living at home at the time her disappearance was discovered. Booker's role as a parent was central to her daily life. Law enforcement records confirmed that officers responding to the scene on the morning her body was found were informed by her oldest child that she and her vehicle were missing, and that blood was discovered in her bedroom. The children were home when she disappeared, indicating her presence as a caregiver in the household up to the moment of her abduction. The presence of Booker's children factored into investigative steps. Police reviewed doorbell camera footage from her residence and identified Booker's movements early on the day she was last seen. In one of the last recordings, Booker was seen leaving her home with a male later identified as the suspect. At one point, she appeared to hesitate and look back toward the doorway before being directed to continue. Investigators have used this footage to reconstruct parts of her final movements. Booker's family context extends beyond her role as a mother. Her father, Leonard Larry, participated in public appeals and community events while authorities conducted their search. Local media documented his involvement in efforts to locate the person responsible, including vigils and coordinated outreach to law enforcement. Larry spoke publicly about the loss of his daughter and the ongoing search for answers, including urging the community to provide information that could lead to the suspect's capture. Beyond immediate family, Booker's siblings and extended family were present during community gatherings and public statements. Reports from vigils held in Racine noted that dozens of community members, family, and neighbors gathered to address the homicide and to call for increased action by law enforcement. These gatherings frequently included remarks from relatives acknowledging Booker's role in the community and the impact of her death on those around her. Booker's community ties also included broader local support initiatives. In addition to vigils, community members organized fundraising efforts to assist her children following her death. These efforts quickly raised significant funds to support her family's immediate needs, reflecting a mobilization of local support following the homicide. On February 20, 2022, police records show that a woman reported being assaulted by Terry Lee Jackson Jr. in Racine, Wisconsin. The complaint described physical violence inflicted by Jackson on the victim during a trip in which the victim had driven to Illinois to pick him up for a scheduled court appearance, after which she transported him back to Racine. During the drive, Jackson reportedly took possession of her phone, physically assaulted her by grabbing her throat and fingers in her eyes, and used a box cutter as a threat. The assault lasted an extended period, and the victim briefly lost consciousness. In her statement to police, the victim indicated Jackson made declarations related to not wanting to return to court or jail. Jackson was known to her as a person previously involved in violent behavior. On February 21st, police responded to a hospital emergency room where the same victim was seeking treatment. The injuries noted included swelling and cuts consistent with an assault occurring the night before. The victim provided law enforcement with a statement identifying Jackson as the assailant in that incident. At that time, police began documenting the attack as a criminal case. Exactly 1 week after the February 20th incident, on February 27, 2022, the Racine Police Department received a call reporting an active assault at a location near Main Street and Hamilton Avenue in the city. Officers arrived to find 2 women injured, the February 20th victim and Brittany Booker, another adult female. Both exhibited significant physical trauma when officers made contact. Booker had cuts and wounds on her head and face consistent with blunt force impact, and the other victim displayed multiple facial lacerations. Medics treated both women on site before transporting them to a local hospital for further treatment. According to the police complaint, the 2 women had returned to a residence they shared with Jackson to collect personal property, at which time Jackson entered the home and initiated a violent assault. During this confrontation, Booker was reportedly holding her young child. She attempted to defend herself by retrieving a kitchen knife and attempted to call emergency services, but was unable to operate her phone effectively while immobilized by the attack. As the assault continued, Jackson struck Booker multiple times with a hammer on her head and face. One of the victims later recounted that Jackson verbally threatened to kill them while committing the assault. Both women required medical staples to close their wounds following emergency care. Medical personnel documented the injuries, and law enforcement took formal statements from the victims during their time at the hospital. Police classified the attack as attempted homicide due to the severity of the wounds and the suspect's actions. Officers at this stage identified Jackson as a suspect in 2 separate attacks with significant injuries to multiple adults and potential endangerment of a minor. The case file included the hammer as a dangerous weapon used in the assault. Following the February 27th assault, the Racine County District Attorney's Office authorized charges against Jackson that included counts for attempted first-degree intentional homicide, recklessly endangering safety, substantial battery, stalking resulting in bodily harm, false imprisonment, and related counts. These charges were linked directly to the documented hammer attack on Booker and the other victim. At the same time, Jackson was already the subject of an unrelated felony drug case out of Racine County that dated back to 2021. He was released on cash bond in that earlier case under the condition he would appear for scheduled court dates. However, records indicate that Jackson failed to appear for a February 22, 2022 court date related to the outstanding drug charges. As a result, a bench warrant was issued for his arrest, and Jackson was considered to have bail jumped. Law enforcement officials then issued a no-bond warrant for Jackson's arrest, citing the violent nature of the February 27th attack and the outstanding bench warrant. At that time, investigators began actively attempting to locate Jackson to take him into custody. Although the police did not immediately release broad public warnings about Jackson's whereabouts, officers confirmed internally that the search for him was ongoing. Police followed standard investigative procedures including reviewing known associates, last known addresses, known travel patterns, and communications related to Jackson. Officers confirmed that he had contacts in multiple states, including Texas and Illinois, and could potentially use those routes to evade arrest. Authorities tracked his movements through a combination of witness interviews, vehicle registrations, and cross-reference with federal databases. A fugitive profile was established, though law enforcement did not immediately broadcast a public manhunt as part of tactical considerations. On April 24, 2022, at approximately 9:30 a.m., Racine police officers responded to a report of a missing adult for the residence located in the 1300 block of Villa Street, Racine. Upon arrival, investigators interviewed residents and observed evidence that suggested foul play. Officers interviewed one of Booker's children, who stated that they had last seen their mother earlier in the morning and had since found blood in her bedroom. Blood was documented inside the home on a towel, in the bed where Booker had been sleeping, and on a child's nightgown, indicating the presence of physical trauma prior to her disappearance. Police reviewed footage from a doorbell camera installed at the home. The recording showed Booker exiting the residence at approximately 5:30 a.m. accompanied by a male individual later identified as Terry Lee Jackson Jr. The footage depicted Booker pausing at the threshold and turning toward the home prior to leaving, and the suspect is seen gesturing for her to proceed. After entering a vehicle together, the two departed the scene. Using GPS data from Booker's phone, law enforcement traced the route of the vehicle after leaving her home, including movement through several nearby city blocks. The vehicle was located by officers parked in the 500 block of 13th Street. Booker's body was found seated in the driver's seat. An autopsy determined that she had multiple blunt force injuries and a single gunshot wound to the head. The bullet casing was recovered at the scene. Based on preliminary investigative analysis, Booker's death was ruled a homicide. Investigators determined that after leaving the home, Booker was compelled to drive under direction of the suspect. Based on GPS and surveillance data, police believe the suspect forced Booker to drive through parts of the neighborhood, possibly in search of another individual involved in the earlier February assault. The vehicle ultimately returned to near her home where the homicide occurred. Inside the residence, blood evidence was documented in multiple areas including the bed, dining room floor, and on items of a child's clothing. The distribution of blood suggested a struggle occurred before Booker left the home with Jackson. The presence of blood on personal items and primary living spaces indicated physical conflict immediately prior to her disappearance. The primary suspect in the homicide of Brittany Booker was identified as Terry Lee Jackson Jr., born July 6, 1980. Jackson's criminal history dates back to at least 1998, with previous convictions in Illinois and periodic incarcerations involving drug offenses, battery, and other crimes. As of the date of the homicide investigation, Jackson was facing multiple outstanding charges, including those related to the February assaults in Racine. Jackson was known to law enforcement due to prior contact with both victims in the February assault. Reports indicate that he had a personal relationship with the February victim and was also known to Booker through mutual connections. Police records describe previous threats of violence and confrontations in which Jackson expressed statements indicating a refusal to comply with court obligations and law enforcement. After the February 27 hammer assault and issuance of the no-bond warrant, Jackson did not surrender. Instead, law enforcement concluded that he evaded capture by moving frequently, potentially crossing state lines. Investigators confirmed Jackson's ties to multiple states including Illinois and Texas, complicating efforts to locate him. Police noted that Jackson's mobility and efforts to remain undetected hindered immediate apprehension. Following Booker's disappearance and confirmation of a homicide, law enforcement engaged the U.S. Marshal Service and local partners to expand the search for Jackson. A $5,000 reward was offered by Crime Stoppers and coordinating agencies for information leading to the capture of Jackson. Authorities also released suspect descriptions and urged citizens not to approach him, labeling him as armed and dangerous. Investigators advised members of the public to report tips to investigative task force officers or through anonymous tip lines. The offer of monetary reward was increased during the search to encourage community involvement in locating the suspect. During the investigation into Jackson's whereabouts, law enforcement identified individuals who allegedly assisted him in avoiding arrest. Carmelita Walker and Alicia Sykes were charged with harboring or aiding a felon for driving Jackson from Racine to Texas shortly after the February assault. Walker admitted awareness of Jackson's assault of Booker and the outstanding warrant for his arrest. Sykes corroborated these events and acknowledged knowledge of Jackson's violent conduct and fugitive status. Another individual, Diamond Hood, was charged with aiding a felon related to her assistance to Jackson near the time of Booker's homicide. Court documents indicated that Jackson used Hood's vehicle to travel to Booker's home on the morning of April 24, after which Booker was killed. Hood admitted knowing that Jackson assaulted the victims in February and that he was wanted by police, yet she provided transportation and shelter. Local community groups and family members held vigils and public gatherings during the period Jackson remained at large. Law enforcement presence was increased around areas associated with Booker's residence, and officials coordinated with federal partners to intensify efforts in the multi-state manhunt. Public gatherings were documented as part of the community's effort to raise awareness and support the investigative process. Law enforcement officials identified that Jackson had fled the state after the homicide, and initial information indicated he was moving across state lines. The United States Marshals Service Great Lakes Regional Fugitive Task Force joined the investigation, operating alongside local and state police from Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Texas, and Arizona. The scope of the search was defined by Jackson's known movements, reported sightings, and electronic and physical evidence indicating possible locations where he might be found. Agencies maintained communication through shared databases, field reports, and interagency briefings in order to track Jackson's movements across jurisdictions. During this period, authorities issued multiple warrants for Jackson's arrest, including for first-degree intentional homicide, attempted homicide, and other serious felony offenses related to the February assaults and the April homicide. In an effort to generate public assistance, law enforcement distributed images and identifying information about Jackson, noting distinct features and advising the public that he should be considered armed and dangerous. A reward of up to $5,000 was offered for information that led to his capture. The fugitive investigation culminated on May 22, 2022, when members of the U.S. Marshals Service Great Lakes Regional Fugitive Task Force located Jackson at a residence in Chicago, Illinois. This location had been identified through a combination of cross-jurisdictional intelligence and tips developed from ongoing investigative efforts. Upon arrival at the Chicago location, law enforcement observed Jackson inside a residence, armed with a firearm. Officers initiated contact and established a perimeter around the building. Tactical personnel engaged in a controlled negotiation to prompt Jackson's surrender. After a brief exchange, Jackson surrendered without incident and was taken into custody without the use of force. A firearm was recovered from the scene at the time of the arrest. The arrest operation was carried out by agents of the U.S. Marshals Service in coordination with local law enforcement. The operation did not involve any reported injuries to officers or other individuals present at the scene. Once in custody, Jackson was detained and prepared for transfer to Wisconsin authorities. Following his apprehension in Chicago, Jackson was processed through the appropriate federal and state channels for extradition to Wisconsin, where the homicide and associated crimes had occurred. Extradition procedures included verifying the outstanding warrants, securing transportation, and transferring custody from the U.S. Marshals Service to the Racine County Jail System. At Jackson's initial court appearance in Wisconsin, a judge set bond at $10 million due to the severity of the charges and the risk factors associated with the suspect, including his prior attempt to evade law enforcement. Jackson was formally held in custody pending further court proceedings, with conditions that prohibited release prior to trial. Once Jackson was in custody, prosecutors filed an extensive array of criminal charges based on the investigations into both the February assaults and the April homicide. Official charging documents included 23 felony counts, each outlining specific allegations and statutory violations. These charges encompass multiple categories of violent crime and procedural offenses. Jackson was charged with the intentional killing of Brittany Booker in connection with the April 24 incident. These counts relate to the February assault on Booker and another woman where Jackson allegedly attempted to kill both victims. Jackson was charged with forcibly removing Booker from her home and placing her into her vehicle prior to her death. Jackson was charged with this offense due to his use of a firearm despite having previous felony convictions. This count reflects actions allegedly taken by Jackson during the course of the attacks, as documented in police complaints. Prosecutors included this count based on allegations that Jackson unlawfully deprived Booker of her liberty before her death. Charges alleging physical actions that impaired the victims during prior assaults. This count stems from documented physical attacks in February. Jackson failed to appear for his scheduled court hearings related to earlier cases, resulting in additional felony bail jumping charges. Charges related to actions that threatened or influenced victims during the assaults. These charges represent the consolidated legal response to Jackson's actions as outlined in the criminal complaint and subsequent filings by prosecutors. After arraignment, Jackson appeared before a Wisconsin judge for preliminary hearings and procedural motions. One scheduling order set a trial date of February 26, 2024, for the case to advance toward jury selection and formal proceedings. This timeline allows the prosecution and defense to exchange evidence, address motions, and prepare for trial. During pre-trial proceedings, Jackson made a request to represent himself rather than continue with appointed counsel. The court reviewed this request and denied Jackson's motion to act as his own attorney, determining that representation by counsel was necessary for an orderly adjudication of the case. This reaffirmed the legal framework that individuals charged with serious felony offenses require qualified legal representation unless they demonstrate competence to proceed pro se. If this story gripped your heart and left you questioning the truth, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with others who need to hear it. For more chilling true crime stories that dive deep into the mysteries behind these tragedies, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest updates, investigations, and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you for being part of this journey with us as we uncover the truth and seek justice. Together, we can make a difference. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.